The officer didn't even finish his sentence before my hands started shaking. "Miss Hale, we've recovered 2 unattended children. They say you're their aunt." My mug slipped. Coffee splashed everywhere. "What? What do you mean you have them? They're supposed to be home." "They were dropped off by a taxi at a building on Riverside." "Wrong building. They were found alone, upset. A neighbor contacted us." I couldn't hear the rest over the pounding in my ears. I grabbed my keys, barely remembering to lock the door. The taxi ride felt endless. Every red light was a punishment. Every turn made my lungs tighter. All I could think was, they're alone. They're scared. Olivia did this to them. She did this because of me. When I reached the precinct, the world tunneled. A small room, buzzing fluorescent lights, gray walls, and 2 tiny figures huddled on a bench. Emma's face was streaked with tears. Caleb's hands shook as he clung to his dinosaur. When they saw me, both shot up and ran into my arms. Their bodies were trembling so violently it rattled my bones. "Aunt Jazz," Emma cried, burying her face in my shoulder. "We didn't know where to go. The building didn't have your door. Theo," she hiccuped and garbled the name. "The driver left." I wrapped them both in my coat, my heart splitting in ways I didn't know it could. Officer Ruiz stepped forward with the clipboard. "They were found on the sidewalk for at least 20 minutes before the neighbor intervened. This situation may qualify as child endangerment. We'll need your statement." My phone buzzed. Olivia calling. I didn't answer. When it buzzed again, Officer Ruiz nodded. "You should take that." I put it on speaker. Olivia's voice exploded through the room. "Where are my kids? The taxi driver said he dropped them off hours ago." My throat burned. "Olivia, you wrote the wrong address. You sent them to the wrong side of the city." A beat of stunned silence on her end. "What? No. You were supposed to be there? This is your fault, Jasmine." Officer Ruiz held out his hand. I passed him the phone without hesitation. "Mrs. Brennan, your children were abandoned on a public sidewalk for at least 20 minutes before the neighbor intervened. This situation may qualify as child endangerment. We'll need your statement." Her voice rose. Rage, denial, panic before the officer ended the call. I looked down at Emma and Caleb, clutching me like they were trying to anchor themselves back into safety. And in that moment, something inside me settled. A line drawn cleanly. If I stayed silent now, I would be part of the danger. Everything that came after, CPS reports, hearings, family implosion, started with that realization, and it would only get worse from here. The next 48 hours felt like living inside a storm cloud. Low pressure, no air, everything humming with a quiet, constant threat. Miss Lane from Child Protective Services called first. Her voice was calm, practiced, the kind of tone that only comes from years of watching families unravel. "We're opening an assessment regarding Emma and Caleb. We'll need to interview you, their father, and their mother." I agreed immediately. There was nothing to hide. David called next. I expected anger, maybe bitterness. He'd always believed Olivia's stories about me. Instead, his voice was tight, horrified. "She told me you confirmed you could watch them. She said everything was arranged." I told her no, clearly, repeatedly. A long silence. "We're coming back to Akron tonight. I want to see the police report." While David booked the earliest flight home, my family turned on me like it was choreographed. Margaret called. Her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "How could you do this to your sister?" Aunt Marion left a voicemail, the old refrain, "Family handles family matters inside the family." But this wasn't a family matter. This was child safety. The line between those things snapped the moment Emma and Caleb were found crying on a sidewalk. By Sunday evening, the narrative against me was already spreading through relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Bitter, single, jealous, dramatic. I'd been called all of those before. But this time, they didn't land. I knew exactly who I was protecting. When David arrived at my apartment that night, he looked shaken. He said, "I saw the report and the statements, Jasmine. Thank you. They could have been hurt or worse." He asked for my help gathering texts, timestamps, call histories, every message from Olivia demanding childcare with no notice, every screenshot where I said no, every time she tried to guilt me anyway. "This isn't a one-time mistake," he said quietly. "It's a pattern." Monday morning, Miss Porter, David's attorney, called me in for a meeting. She was composed, razor-sharp, and frighteningly efficient. "We'll be requesting temporary custody. Your testimony is crucial. This case will move quickly." My stomach twisted, not from fear, but from the realization of what that meant. Olivia would come for me. Margaret would tear me apart. The family would split straight down the middle. Miss Porter seemed to read my hesitation. "You're not doing this to your sister," she said softly. "You're doing this for those children." That night, sitting alone in my apartment above the river, I finally allowed myself to feel the quiet collapse of a lifetime role: agreeable daughter, dutiful sister, the one who patched holes and smoothed over things. That Jasmine was gone, and in her place stood someone who would not look away again. 3 days after the police found Emma and Caleb, my phone rang again, this time from Miss Porter. Her voice carried the sharpness of a blade. "Jasmine, the petition is filed. David is seeking emergency custody. Olivia will be served today." The call that destroyed her, that's what I would later call it. Because the moment Olivia realized this wasn't a family argument, this was the law, her entire world collapsed. Olivia called me 30 seconds later, voice jagged and feral. "How dare you? How dare you do this to me, Jazz?" I had rehearsed responses before, didn't let my voice wobble. I said, "You did this to yourself," forcing my tone level. "You left them with a driver. People do that all the time. You left them on the wrong side of the city, alone, crying." "No," I cut in. "If you'd acted like a mother, none of this would have happened." She screamed until the line went dead. Miss Porter called back. "Don't engage with her anymore. Everything goes through legal channels now." And just like that, the real battle began. The courthouse felt colder than the outside air. Echoing floors, high ceilings, polished wood that looked too clean for the kind of broken families walking through its doors. David sat beside his attorney, shoulders set. I sat behind them, hands clenched so tightly the bones ached. Olivia walked in last. She looked perfect, hair curled, makeup soft, outfit coordinated to project gentle motherhood. She clutched a tissue dramatically in one hand. Her attorney put a protective palm on her shoulder. A performance. A well-rehearsed one. When the hearing began, Olivia's attorney stepped forward first. "Your Honor, my client is a devoted mother who made a single mistake under extraordinary stress. This entire situation is being grossly exaggerated by a bitter, childless sister with a long history of jealousy." I felt heat crawl up my neck, but I didn't react. Facts would speak. He continued, "Mrs. Brennan volunteers at the children's school. She attends activities. She has been the primary caregiver their whole lives." Miss Porter stood, expression controlled and focused. "Your Honor, we have law enforcement reports, CPS documentation, eyewitness statements, and a pattern of neglect extending far beyond this incident." Judge Reynolds turned to the witness stand. "Call your first witness." Officer Ruiz stepped up. He testified plainly. The taxi left the children on a sidewalk for at least 20 minutes. The written address was incomplete and inaccurate. The building had no such apartment. The children were distressed, cold, and confused. The courtroom shifted. Olivia stared straight ahead, jaw tightening. Next came Miss Lane from CPS. Her report was devastating. Prior incidents of Olivia failing to pick the children up on time. A previous call from the school about Caleb wandering near a busy street. Notes about Emma expressing fear of being left again. Observations of Olivia prioritizing personal activities over supervision. Olivia's shoulders curled inward. Miss Porter stood. "We now call Ms. Jasmine Hale." My pulse pounded as I approached the stand. I took the oath, sat, and folded my hands carefully in my lap. "Ms. Hale," Miss Porter began, "did you agree to babysit on the day of the incident?" Numb. Did you clearly communicate that to Mrs. Brennan? Yes, multiple times. Were you aware she still intended to send the children to you? I had absolutely no idea. Olivia's attorney rose for cross. His smirk was a knife. Ms. Hale, isn't it true you've always resented your sister? You're jealous of her life, her family, her success. No, I said. He paced slowly. You've watched these children dozens of times, correct? Yes. And this time you chose work over family. I chose safety over enabling dangerous behavior. Miss Porter didn't smile, but the corners of her eyes softened with approval. When I stepped down, Olivia stared at me with pure venom. Then it was her turn to testify. She cried almost instantly. I thought they were going to my sister's home, she sniffled. I didn't mean for anything bad to happen. I wrote the address fast. I had no idea the driver would get confused. Miss Porter's cross was merciless but calm. Mrs. Brennan, is it true you didn't confirm your sister would be home? I assumed. Is it true you left the children without verifying the building had the apartment you wrote? I was in a hurry. And is it true this is not the first time you failed to supervise the children properly? That's exaggerated. It's documented, Ms. Lane said. The room went silent. Judge Reynolds leaned forward, his expression carved from stone. This is not a single lapse. This is a pattern of disregard for a child's safety. Olivia's face crumpled. David reached back slightly, brushing his hand against mine for a second. A silent thank you, a shared grief for what this had come to. The judge continued, voice absolute. Primary physical custody will be awarded to Mr. Brennan. Mrs. Brennan's visitation will be supervised until she completes parenting courses, individual therapy, and demonstrates sustained behavioral change. Olivia let out a sound between a gasp and a sob. When the court adjourned, she stormed down the hallway toward me. You ruined my life, she hissed. I looked at her calmly. You nearly ruined theirs. Her face twisted, but she had no words left. For the first time, Olivia realized she couldn't spin this into a story where she was the victim. And I realized the same thing. I wasn't the family's shadow anymore. I wasn't the backup plan. I wasn't the one who swallowed every injustice. I was the one who finally protected Emma and Caleb in a way no one ever protected me, and nothing would ever be the same. Life didn't calm down overnight, but the air around us all finally felt breathable. David set up a structured routine at his apartment. Homework charts on the fridge, regular dinners, early bedtimes. Emma's nightmares stopped after a few weeks. Caleb started sleeping without the hallway light on. Helen and George welcomed me into their home like I'd always been family, thanking me in ways that made my throat ache. Even my boss, Miss Ramirez, pulled me aside one morning. Take whatever time you need, she said. You protected those kids. That matters. Olivia attended her supervised visits, usually distracted, usually defensive. Therapy notes said she was present physically, detached emotionally. I stopped waiting for her to change. I had lost the version of a family I once begged for, but I gained something steadier, a chosen family built on respect, boundaries, and safety. And watching Emma and Caleb finally exhale, it made every battle worth it. Looking back, everything shifted the moment I said no. Olivia sent the kids in a taxi. The driver got the wrong side of the city, and 3 days later came the call that unraveled her story completely. But protecting Emma and Caleb was worth every fracture that followed. In the weeks that followed the custody ruling, life settled into a rhythm that felt almost unreal in its steadiness. The air lost its sharp edges. The days no longer carried the undercurrent of crisis they once had. I still woke sometimes expecting a barrage of texts, a missed call from an unknown number, an emergency that wasn't mine to handle. But the phone stayed silent. Not peaceful exactly, but quiet in a way that made room for breath.
a way that felt earned. David kept me updated on everything, not out of obligation, but out of genuine gratitude. Emma had joined the library's Saturday reading club. Caleb had made a friend in his swim class, a little boy named Grayson who collected toy sharks and insisted Caleb borrow one each week. Their school counselor reported fewer anxious behaviors. Their pediatrician noted they were sleeping better. "We're getting our kids back," David told me one evening, voice thick with hope he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. I could hear Emma laughing in the background, a high, unburdened sound that lifted something inside my chest.
I visited them often, sometimes helping with homework, sometimes eating dinner with them, simply because they liked the way it felt when the table was full. They told me about their days, their new routines, the teachers they liked, the dreams they didn't have to hide anymore. The shift was gradual, but it was real. They exhaled the fear they'd carried. They made room for a childhood that had been waiting for them all along. Meanwhile, Olivia's presence receded like a shadow at sunset. Supervised visits continued, but became less tumultuous. She showed up, usually distant, usually quiet, but she showed up. The reports were consistent. She remained detached, still struggled with accountability, still had difficulty engaging emotionally. But there were no more screams, no new emergencies, no attempts to twist the narrative into something it wasn't. She seemed to hover in a strange middle ground, done fighting, but not quite healing either. I learned not to expect more. Healing couldn't be forced. Accountability couldn't be demanded into existence. Some people grew, some didn't. I finally accepted that it wasn't my job to control which one she chose to be. One late afternoon in April, as the trees along the Cuyahoga River bloomed with pale pink buds, I walked home from work along the same path I'd taken countless times. But everything looked different now, softer somehow, warmer. The city wasn't a battlefield anymore. It was just a place where life kept moving, where people rebuilt, where small miracles unfolded quietly in kitchen corners and school hallways and bedtime routines. Halfway across the footbridge, my phone buzzed. It was a picture from David. Emma and Caleb were sitting at the kitchen table with construction paper and markers scattered everywhere. In the photo, they were holding up two drawings, a messy rainbow from Caleb and a bright yellow sun from Emma with uneven rays reaching out like open arms. Underneath the image, David wrote only 4 words. "They wanted you to see." I stopped walking. The river glimmered beneath the bridge. Cars hummed faintly in the distance. For the first time in a very long time, tears came. But they weren't heavy. They didn't sting. They felt like release. They felt like warmth. That evening, I visited their apartment. Emma met me at the door with a smile that stretched all the way across her face. Caleb ran up behind her, dinosaur in hand. "Aunt Jazz, look." He held up the rainbow drawing like it was a masterpiece. And to me, it was. David set plates on the table while Helen stirred something fragrant on the stove. George carried in a bowl of salad with a quiet hum. It felt like stepping into a version of my life I never knew could exist. One built on steadiness, care, and the kind of trust that wasn't demanded, only given freely. After dinner, while Emma colored and Caleb lined up toy dinosaurs across the living room rug, David sat beside me on the couch. "You saved them," he said quietly. "You saved all of us, really." I shook my head. "No, I just stopped saying yes to the wrong people." He smiled, but there was something like awe behind it. Sometimes that's the bravest thing anyone can do. Later that night, as I walked home beneath streetlights softened by spring air, I thought about the version of myself who would have done anything, anything to avoid confrontation, to keep the peace, to maintain the illusion of family harmony. I mourned her a little, but I also knew that she had carried me as far as she could. The rest I had learned on my own, piece by piece, boundary by boundary, truth by truth. When I reached my apartment, I paused at the door. The city was quiet, the river slow and steady in the dark. My life, once shaped by other people's demands and expectations, felt wider now,
brighter, like it actually belonged to me. And as I stepped inside, I realized something simple, something steady, something true. The moment Emma and Caleb ran into my arms at that police station, trembling and terrified, the path ahead of all of us had shifted. Yes, it fractured the family I thought I wanted. Yes, it forced truths into the open that we'd all avoided. Yes, it hurt. But it also built something stronger, something grounded, something honest. A real family. One made by choice, not obligation. Looking back, everything changed the moment I said no. Olivia sent the kids in a taxi. The driver went to the wrong side of the city. And 3 days later came the call that unraveled the truth. But choosing to protect Emma and Caleb, choosing to stand in that truth, was worth everything that came after. And for the first time, it finally felt like enough.